Hi, it's Camilla from the Sewing Society, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make a really handy fold-away shopping bag. This bag is great to use up any mid-sized scraps that you've got, and also if you've got fat quarters, if you're a quilter, you might have some beautiful fat quarters that are just waiting to be made into something beautiful and practical. This is a beginner-friendly pattern, although it does have bias binding in it. So if you haven't used bias binding before, that's something new to learn. It's a pretty speedy project as well. So if you've not got a lot of time, this is a great one to sort of fit in when you've got a moment. This is a free pattern that I'd love to share with you all. It's in the description box below. I've left a link so that you can download it and print it out. You'll need about 55 centimeters of fabric to make this bag. I've used a mid-weight linen. I wouldn't go any heavier than that, otherwise it'll be too difficult to fold up. Okay, let's get started. You should have 4 pattern pages that need to be taped together, like this. Once all the pages are taped together, you can cut out the bag pattern. You'll need some mid-weight woven fabric, thread, elastic, and some bias binding. You'll need to cut out the pattern twice on the fold. So to get that, fold the selvages into the center to get 2 folded sides. Now it's time to cut out your 2 bag pieces. Now we can start sewing that we've got our pieces cut out. Lay them on top of each other, right sides together. Now we're going to sew the 2 sides and the bottom of the bag together. There's a 1 centimeter seam allowance here, and once we get to the machine, we're going to sew each of the sides, pivoting once we get to the corners. To start stitching, we're going to just do a little back stitch and then sew all the way down to the first corner, where we're going to pivot by leaving the needle in the fabric, lifting the foot, swiveling the fabric, placing the foot back down, and then continue to sew. And we'll do that again on the second corner. When we get to the end, do another little back stitch. Now we're going to finish off the raw edges. I'm using the overlocker, but you can use the zigzag stitch on your sewing machine or pinking shears if you prefer. press all of your seams so they're nice and flat. While we're at the ironing board, we're going to get the binding ready by pressing down the sides into the middle and then in half. I made this binding myself with some fabric that I had in my stash, which is really nice to be able to make your own to give your projects a little bit of something different than just a plain colored binding. If you'd like a tutorial on how to make bias binding, you can let me know in the comments below. So we're just encasing now the handle opening. Bias binding is great to use on curves because it gives it the flexibility to go around the edges. Now we'll just trim here when we get to the end. And now we're going to sew this in place. To sew the binding in place, we're going to sew as close as we can to the binding edge, but still making sure that we're catching the other side of the binding while we're sewing. I like to use a pin to sort of guide me as I'm stitching to make sure everything is in place. And then we get over that seam there. You might need to lift up the needle to help you get around the corners. We'll repeat that for the other side of the handle opening. Now, with the bag inside out, we're going to stitch up the two tops of each handle. Once that's done, press the seams open so they're nice and flat. There's no need to finish these with overlocking or zigzag stitch. Now we're going to fold over the handle onto itself so that the seams are enclosed, like this. Repeat on the other side. And we just need to baste this in place for the moment because binding will go over the top of it to enclose it properly. At this point, I really needed a coffee. I love coffee, so I drink a lot of it. Next, we're going to turn the bag inside out, or right side out, rather, and we're going to add a little piece of elastic so that we're able to keep it folded up once we're done. So you're going to keep like one twist in the elastic so that when it's on the bag, it's not twisted. That'll make sense once we've finished. Zigzag the elastic in place And now we're gonna finish off with binding on the rest of the raw edges. So I'm trimming off the little bits of binding from before that are sticking out, just to make it easier to put on this next piece of binding. So same method as before, pinning all the way around. Make sure that you catch the other side of the binding and also the other part of the handle, the folded in part. Enclosing over the elastic, and then over the other side of the handle. To finish off the end, trim the binding so that you have enough seam allowance on either side of where you'd like to sew. So I want to sew there as my seam line. So I've got about 1 centimeter on each side of that, on each piece of binding. So I'm just putting a pin so I know where I want to sew. And then I'm opening up the binding and matching the right sides together. And now we can sew that together. Once we've sewn that together, press it the seam open, trimming away any loose threads, and refold in those seam allowances, and it makes your binding fit perfectly around your bag. For this next part, I'm going to take off the flatbed so that I've got free arm. It just makes it a bit easier to get all the fabric underneath the machine and to be able to keep going continuously without it getting stuck. So again, we're going to sew really close to the edge, as close as possible, but still catching everything on the other side. Now we're nearly there. We just have to sew in the gussets. So on the pattern, there was a marking of about 7 centimeters in from the side edge. And that is to mark where we need to fold over to stitch down the gusset. So I'm doing that on both sides and pinning it in place. Sew down on top of the seam allowance that we have already for the bottom seam. I'm just finishing up the threads and turning the bag inside out, right side out. And there it gives you a nice gusset so that it can fit lots of goodies inside. And now all we have to do is fold up our grocery bag ready to take with us. So to do that, turn the bag over so the elastic is on the underside and fold it into thirds, and then thirds again, and roll up from the bottom and take your elastic and loop it around. And there you go, all done. I hope you enjoyed that bag tutorial, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see some more tutorials like this one. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!